Section 25. This 2023 Act being necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, and safety, an emergency is declared to exist, and this 2023 Act takes effect on its passage.
On third reading of Senate Bill 4B, with our first carrier on open, recognize Senator Solman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I am thrilled today to rise in support of Senate Bill 4B, Oregon CHIPS, a bipartisan economic plan that will open the door for a once-in-a-generation opportunity to solidify Oregon's place as a global leader in the semiconductor industry. I am especially thrilled that we are here on the Senate floor voting on this bill before the end of March. What an incredible accomplishment for this body to have moved with such urgency on a bill of this magnitude. Our work began last year with the Semiconductor Task Force, which laid out a plan to ensure Oregon remained competitive in this industry. Since then, we've debated, we've compromised, and now we are here on a bill that will build a stronger, brighter future for our state and our nation. Oregon is already a world leader in the semiconductor development. Per capita, we have the largest number of people working in the semiconductor manufacturing industry in the United States. In the world of the semiconductor development, it's Taiwan, Korea, and Oregon. For our economy, our national security, and our future, we have to maintain and grow our leadership in semiconductor manufacturing. This bill allocates $210 million in total to support our semiconductor industry, an investment that will attract billions in federal support and economic growth. $190 million will go to the newly created Oregon CHIPS Fund. This fund will be used by the Oregon Business Development Department and the governor to issue grants and loans to qualifying businesses. These grants and loans will allow businesses to then apply for money through the Federal CHIPS and Science Act, which will set aside $52 billion to boost domestic semiconductor manufacturing. That is our once-in-a-generational opportunity. The bill also puts $10 million into the new Industrial Land Fund for assisting local governments to prepare sites for semiconductor industrial development. The University Innovation Research Fund will also receive $10 million to support public universities looking to leverage federal research grants. To ensure that we're protecting Oregonians' hard-earned dollars, Senate Bill 4 has oversight provisions that will require businesses to repay grants or loans if a project does not move forward or fails to deliver on its promises. Some of these projects are going to require land. Cutting-edge semiconductor manufacturing centers, or fabs, can require up to 900 acres of space. Right now, it's impossible to find a site of that size within our urban growth boundary. But we know that Oregon's land use system is central to who we are as a state. The balance we struck with Senate Bill 4 was to create a transparent, accountable process through which the governor could bring in a maximum of 8 sites into the urban growth boundary. The governor's powers will be limited in scope, subject to a public process, and temporary in nature. Before designating any land, the governor must conduct a public meeting near the site, take public comment for no less than 20 days, and determine that there is no land currently in the UGB in that area that is suitable for the project being considered. Once the designation is complete, a local government with jurisdiction over that land may amend its comprehensive land use plan and codes to implement the order. The purpose of this measure is to ensure we preserve Oregon's land use values while keeping Oregon competitive with the semiconductor and advanced manufacturing industry. We simply cannot be left behind. When Oregon lands just one semiconductor fab, it will support more than 26,000 permanent jobs and generate $2.8 billion in state net revenue over 20 years. That's $2.8 billion we can invest in improving our schools, building more affordable housing, getting Oregonians the mental health and addiction treatment they need, and making our communities safer. Committing $210 million this early in session would be extraordinary and show how urgent Oregon wants to take this advantage of this opportunity. And we haven't pushed all our chips into the middle yet. We are committed to continuing conversations around what more the legislature can do this session to ensure Oregon benefits from this incredible opportunity. With that, colleagues, I urge an aye vote, and I'm going to pass it to my co-carrier.
The second carrier recognizes Senator Knopp.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I stand in support of Senate Bill 4B. We all received a dramatic wake-up call last year, I believe it was in January, when Intel announced their landmark investment in Ohio. And obviously, we want that investment to continue in Oregon. And it is clear that we need to create a friendlier climate in order for that to happen. So companies are going to make decisions based on long-term investment and their ability to regain from those investments. In other words, the ROI. The investment that didn't happen in Oregon was a blow to Silicon Forest that was built by so many decades of effort by so many, really starting, I think, with Oregon leaders like Governor Vicatillo. In February of last year, after that announcement, Governor Brown formed the Oregon Semiconductor Competitiveness Task Force. I was honored to serve on this task force along with so many other incredible Oregonians. And what we heard on the task force is something that we, quite frankly, have heard for a long time, something that we will continue to bring up in this body. And even with the passage of Senate Bill 4, Oregon is still not as competitive as it needs to be for businesses, for our land use system, to be able to react to things that come up like this. In August of 2022, President Biden signed the Federal CHIPS Act, which brought federal resources, approximately $52 billion, that was put on the table, $19 billion, I think, of which gets spent this year, for companies that are looking to onshore semiconductor and advanced manufacturing. This is important not just for our economy, but also for our national security and the rising danger we face from communist China. I want to thank my good co-chair, Senate co-chair from the committee from Senate District 15, as well as co-chair Bynum and vice co-chair Wallen on the Joint Semiconductor Committee for working closely and collaboratively in a bipartisan manner on this legislation. We had so many committee members that worked very hard on this. It's a large committee, but it's been an effective committee. Senate Bill 4 comes to us here in the Senate as what I hope is a start of something important. Hopefully the beginning of a movement for our state to bring back a friendly business climate. It is going to be critical if we're going to do something extraordinary that we do something in terms of incentives to help our businesses here in Oregon expand for the good paying, high paying family wage jobs that exist in the semiconductor industry. We want more of them, not less. I believe this is a good bill, but we still, of course, want to do more. I think that more involves extension of enterprise zones, a gain share, and a research and development tax credit. I know we have a work group that's working on that. I appreciate the Chair of Revenue and his efforts, and the Senator from West Valley have been engaging pretty significantly on that. I appreciate that. So I'm going to vote in support of Senate Bill 4 today and then get back to the hard work of making Oregon the same state where Phil Knight could sell shoes out of the back of his Plymouth and ultimately build an incredible Oregon-based company into a global powerhouse. We can't allow our economy to remain broken, because in many areas it is. I've read too many headlines about population losses, about businesses closing, and if we allow businesses and Oregonians to continue to leave because taxes are too high, the homelessness issue remains unsolved, the cost of living continues to climb higher. We could give them their kicker back, by the way. That would help in that regard. And crime rates that are too unsafe. If we allow that to happen, ultimately, colleagues, we will fail Oregonians. I know people have some concerns about this bill, and I truly understand them. If we had a land use system that actually worked, we wouldn't need to make any adjustments today. And the reason that adjustments are going to need to be made is because our land use system doesn't act quickly. It is 3 to 5 years minimum, usually, when you're looking to develop property, whether it's residential or commercial, if you're starting from the beginning, and especially if you're not in the urban growth boundary or urban reserves. I've had 20 years of experience with Oregon's land use system in my professional life, and if there is something that is broken, it is clearly that. So this bill does something that we otherwise wouldn't do if that was the case, that we had a land use system that actually worked. And while I recognize that not everybody agrees with that, and some sections in relation to this in the bill are controversial for people, literally we have no choice if we want to step up and continue to be a leader in the semiconductor industry. We can cede that to other states, and the national security implications of this bill are so significant, and that's why it exists. The CHIPS Act exists, this bill exists, because there's been a movement away from research and development and manufacturing of chips in America. I think we've gone from about 37% to about 12% of worldwide production. Now, Oregon is still a leader in the world, but nonetheless, we are dropping. And who is picking up that is Korea and Taiwan. And as you all have probably seen and heard and read, China is threatening Taiwan. And if they ever act, it would be a significant disruption worldwide in the US as it relates to all kinds of chips, those that help to defend us, those that help to run our cars, those that run our medical equipment, those that let you know what your refrigerator is doing while you're sitting on the Senate floor, those chips that run literally our entire lives. And so it is critical to onshore these jobs that are mostly high-paying jobs, and what better place to do that than Oregon? And I know that there are many areas of Oregon that are primed and ready. So there are areas around the state where there is land within the UGB. Redmond and Central Oregon is well positioned. Medford, Boardman area. There's areas in Albany and others where there's land within the UGB, but not for the type of large fab that Intel has. Those fabs, the new fabs, it started out years ago that it would only need 500 acres. Now you're about 1,200 acres for one of those fabs, and they're like 1.2 million square feet under roof. So pretty significant. So colleagues, for all those reasons, I urge your support today of Senate Bill 4. And I recognize we're making this investment early. And even if we waited for the May forecast, which I think some want to do, and I understand that argument, I would still make this investment nonetheless. So I encourage the support of Senate Bill 4 today. Thank you.
Senator Hansel has yielded his time. In the queue, recognize Senator Girard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I was the only no vote on Ways and Means, and I'd like to address the reason that I was. Last week, we received a rather austere budget. Now, I mean, it was pretty plain. There wasn't a whole lot extra for community colleges. There wasn't a whole lot extra for K-12 or higher ed. Corrections, not so good. But it, I mean, we could make it work. The problem, which the good senator from the Deschutes brought up, was we haven't waited for the May forecast. We have no idea the exact amount of money that we have to budget to. If we have a big cut in the May forecast, that austere budget's going to get really ugly. So far, if we pass this, we will have passed $400 million. $400 million. Before we even start to try to balance a general fund budget. This can be the best investment in the world, but there's no reason not to wait till May to see what we have. You have to compare it to an opportunity cost. That's how we do budgets. That's how you do budgets in your own household. Am I willing to spend so much for X, or am I willing to spend the same amount for Y? We're going to have to make those decisions. K-12 is a big budget. Are we going to cut K-12? Are we going to cut community colleges, higher ed, corrections, state police? And so for those reasons, I did vote no. But I think there's another reason that you also have to start looking at, and that was brought up a little bit by the good senator from Deschutes County, and that is that we have to start looking at why we have to do all these giveaways to attract big business to the state of Oregon. We are the number two. Number two, Massachusetts is number one. Number two taxing state in the nation. The difference between our taxation and Florida is about 10%. And we're in the 20s, they're in the teens, but you figure that out, and that's a lot of money. Not only that, but in order to get things approved, it's very, very difficult. And it's kind of unfair that we pick out the chip industry and say, hey, we're going to really put out money for the chip industry when we don't do the same thing for a lot of other industries that are really struggling right now and are having to move out of the state. So that's another argument and good reason to vote no on this bill. Now, the final reason, if there is a downturn, and I think there will be a downturn in the budget. I'm not a prophet, it might be wrong, but if the May forecast is down and we don't have the money, then what are we going to want to do? We're going to want to raid the rainy day fund, the school stability fund, or the kicker. All of those things are rather sacred, especially the stability fund and the rainy day fund, because those are designed for when we really have problems. So, colleagues, $400 million before we even get to the point where we're doing a budget is not realistic. And this can be the best project in the world. And honestly, I think it's probably a fairly good project. But you have to wait till the May forecast, and you have to be able to do opportunity costs and comparisons. And we have to be willing to say, okay, we're not going to fund K-12 another $200 million. That's something we're going to have to make those statements. So for those reasons, I would encourage a no, not for the project right now, but a no until the May forecast. Thank you.
Additional discussion. Recognize Senator Golden.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a difficult vote before us. I think we're being asked to take a whole lot on faith with this $210 million expenditure. And I really appreciate the comments of the senator from the Santiam Canyon. We're being asked to make this expenditure at a time when we're being told to expect that some programs that we feel are critical are not likely to get funded at adequate levels this year. I have some concern that the federal money that's been laid on the table has rushed us, and the fear of missing out to other states' wins, FOMO on this, has rushed us more than an expenditure like this deserves. It's had the feel of a land rush, maybe a CHIPS rush. Now, at the same time, I understand that sort of comes with the territory at a moment like this, and I thank my colleagues who've worked so hard to put this together. I don't know how many times I've been in my office around dinner time and clicked on the monitor and saw that joint committee at work. It's been quite a few. All that said, I'm going to be casting a difficult yes vote today, with an understanding that I've drawn from the conversations around this measure in recent weeks. This bill leaves a tremendous amount of money, a large majority of these dollars, with great latitude on how it will be spent. There are some who favor spending it on direct financial incentives to the semiconductor industry, and because of the mixed record of roughly similar incentive programs like that, I am not in that camp. There are just too many instances where the sideboards put on to secure the taxpayers' investment have not worked out as planned. The camp I'm in favors spending most of the money on directly strengthening Oregon, infrastructure, fortifying workforce training, and investing more in the relevant sectors of higher education that desperately need it, so that we have a compelling case to attract high-tech industry to Oregon, not just right now, but through a competition among states that will certainly continue long after the CHIPS Act funds expire. That's a no-lose choice. My yes vote assumes that a lot of this money will go to the kind of capacity building expenditures that, because I don't think there's a way to go wrong if we do that, however this current competition comes out. Mr. President, this bill is based on a goal that I think we all share, increasing Oregon's prosperity. My hope is that we all agree that central to that is broadening Oregon's prosperity to more and more people who haven't been sharing it. I've heard from some strong supporters of this bill that a rising tide raises all boats. I'm hoping that's true in this case, but I have to say that for people struggling in my district to get by, that theory is abstract and uncertain. If Senate Bill 4 becomes law, here is my suggestion. Let's ask leadership to convene an interim work group from all over the state with strong representation from city and county and nonprofit economic developers, labor leaders, small business development centers, workforce experts in higher ed, and let's ask them to answer this question. how could we best spend, let's say, $20 million, 1/10 of what we're talking about today, in a way that would, number one, lift the largest possible number of Oregonians into the ranks of family wage employment. Number two, would enhance the ability of small and medium-sized businesses to offer and sustain those jobs. And number three, that would prioritize workers, families, and businesses outside the metro region. In other words, how could we get the most durable and widely spread benefits for an investment of 1/10 of what SB4 calls for? The results of that, Mr. President, would likely be something my constituents could see as a tide that would lift a lot of boats, some of them theirs. Finally, I want to align with earlier comments, most recently from the senator from the Mount Hood region, about the critical importance of protecting our high-value farmlands. In that connection, I'm putting faith in language in Section 10, Sub 3 of this bill, that before citing on resource land, the governor has to determine that, quote, existing lands within an urban growth boundary would not meet the needs of the specific project, end quote. Mr. President, I read that very literally. I think we need to be rigorous on that requirement. I take that to mean that if we have two hypothetical sites, Site A that's in the urban growth boundary and is not ideal, is suitable, checks off lots of the boxes, but may not be the very most desirable site for a very large manufacturer we'd like to settle here. And Site B that is resource land and is the number one choice of this hypothetical firm, semi-chip firm, that doesn't meet, we pick Site A in that condition because the condition in the bill that no other site can meet the need is not met. It's a subjective standard. I hope it's taken quite rigorously, keeping in mind how valuable our prime farmland is for the purposes that the good senator mentioned. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Patterson yielded her time. Recognize Senator Bonham.
Thank you, Mr. President. Concerns about Senate Bill 4. Specified authority provided to the governor to add up to 8 sites into existing urban growth boundaries to provide land for industrial uses related to the semiconductor industry or advanced manufacturing by executive order. The legislature should not outsource our role and responsibility to the executive branch. We represent the people in a direct and special way that can't be duplicated by the executive branch. This should be the role and responsibility of this body. The Willamette Valley farms experience average temperature range of 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, a frost-free season that is the majority of the year, annual average precipitation of 48 inches. There's a range of 35 to 63. It's a big valley. But you contrast that with the rainfall of 12 inches that a Jefferson County farmer might get. An area of the state that's experienced decade-long drought. Do we care about our farming capacity here in Oregon? We've heard concerns about China's relative potential to monopolize the microchip industry. Do we really want to outsource our ability to grow our own food? If we plow under farmland in the Willamette Valley, farmland that has sustained itself on rainfall, are we willing to build the necessary capacity of water storage projects, invest in conservation efforts, or invest billions to desalinize ocean water to send it throughout the state to make up for the loss of viable farmland? I think there's a lack of historic investment in these areas that proves that no, we're not ready to make that investment. But we're going to invite investment that's going to take up this valuable resource. With respect to concerns over land use, We continue to treat symptoms in lieu of taking direct action, tackling the underlying systemic challenges and barriers to development that are inherent in our current land use laws. I don't understand why we don't open this back up for discussion and have real debate over how we're going to develop and what our long-term plan is for the state of Oregon and our land, where we choose to develop, what land we choose to protect. We need to discuss this, and we should not, again, be allowing the governor to make these decisions unilaterally. The legislature gave Intel huge 50-year tax breaks in 2013. Yet where are they looking to expand? In the ultimate "what have you done for me lately" move, Intel took their business to Ohio, where incidentally they're going to plow under farmland to develop their new facilities. I'll echo the concerns of the good senator from the Santiam Canyon. We don't know what the future of our budget looks like, the future of our economy looks like. And to make this decision now without knowing where our economy stands or where we're heading, I feel right now that that's irresponsible. We should wait for the May forecast. This is a complex topic. I understand the concerns. I understand why people would support the bill. I quite frankly, I do. Yet there are fundamental flaws in this approach that should be addressed before we send this forward, before we invest more money in this than we have in homelessness. The things that our constituents told us were top of mind, top priority, those are the things that we should be considering how to move forward prior to making this decision here today. So colleagues, I will be a no, and I would hope that you would stand with me and give this time for more further consideration.
Additional discussion. Recognize Senator Thatcher.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President. I heard comments earlier that Oregon is not as competitive as it could be, and I agree. But is the answer to throw taxpayer money at a particular set of private businesses? Or is it better to work to craft policies that help competition thrive for all businesses in our state? It is not business friendly, in my opinion, to spend public money to only maybe attract one particular industry. Regardless of all the aspirational, wonderful visions of all the great things that might happen when this bill passes, there is no guarantee that any of this money will actually bring the desired result. There is, however, a guarantee that Oregon will have less money to spend on homelessness, mental health, drug abuse, law enforcement, education, veterans, jails, it goes on and on. Those are the issues that Oregonians care about, not on whether we set up public money giveaways for one private industry. There's a lot of justification for spending this bill. There's a lot of hope, and I would say faith, as the senator from Rogue Valley stated, included in spending this money. How many times have we been promised rainbows and unicorns, and how many times are we gonna fall for it? Once again, for so many reasons that have already been mentioned, we are lacking foresight, and I will be a no.
Additional discussion. Recognize Senator Lieber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, today I rise in support of Senate Bill 4, Oregon CHIPS, and as a member of the Semiconductor Committee. We heard countless hours of testimony on this particular bill. This is a negotiated bill with sideboards with regard to land use, and a carefully crafted bill to make sure that we are going to leverage money in order to get a semiconductor, in order to support our semiconductor industry. Semiconductors are our present and our future. They are everything from cars to credit cards. They power our modern world, and they power Oregon's economy. If we had waited in the 90s to do anything about semiconductors, we actually wouldn't be standing here today with the robust economy that we have. The federal government has put up $52 billion in this first tranche of money in order for people to invest in semiconductors for all sorts of reasons, of which you have heard many talk about here today. It is about not only about jobs, of which an estimate is that one additional semiconductor campus could support 26,000 new Oregon jobs annually, but it's also about the timing, and time is of the essence. This is not timing that we picked. This is timing that the federal government picked. And we need to make sure that we grab this opportunity and grab it now. This is going to be the kind of opportunity that a legislature 50 years from now looks back and says, I am glad that this legislature took a bold step to attract an industry that will fuel our economy for the next 50 years. So I stand before you urging an aye vote on this. Even though you might not like parts of this, this is our taking bold steps to make sure that we can ensure an economy in Oregon for the next 50 years. Thank you.
Additional discussion. Recognize Senator Meek.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I stand in support of Senate Bill 4 this afternoon. Also, as a former security policeman in the United States Air Force, I secured nuclear weapons and have seen how cutting-edge technology goes hand in hand with national security. Semiconductors are a critical part of our national security infrastructure, and being cut off from semiconductors is a risk to any country's security and military capabilities. This is a real concern for the United States, particularly around possible future Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which is home to 65% of the world's advanced semiconductor production. In light of this threat and other potential supply chain disruptions, the U.S. needs to protect our access to semiconductors. In 2022, President Biden signed the CHIPS Act into law, which includes $52 billion in funding to grow domestic manufacturing of semiconductors and chip-making equipment. Oregon is in a unique position to take advantage of this funding. The heart of America's semiconducting industry is right here in Oregon's Silicon Forest. Oregon's semiconductor manufacturers are already an integral part of America's national security infrastructure. For example, Intel's Hillsboro campus is one of the largest semiconductor manufacturing facilities in the world, and its processors power many of the nation's military and intelligence systems. ON Semiconductor, another major player in Oregon's semiconductor industry, provides critical components for military systems such as radar, missile guidance, and communication systems. Global Foundries, which recently acquired IBM's semiconductor manufacturing division, produces advanced semiconductors that are essential to national security applications. Oregon's semiconductor companies also work closely with government officials to develop and produce advanced cybersecurity systems that are used to protect the nation's critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. Even with this existing infrastructure, semiconductor development is extremely complex and expensive. Today, no major semiconductor facilities are built anywhere in the world without significant government support. To maintain our position as a leader in the semiconductor industry and protect U.S. national security, Oregon must take steps to improve our competitive footing, and Senate Bill 4 is a strong start. I am already leading conversations about tax incentives and other initiatives to further set us up for success. But let me make this clear. Passage of those incentives this session will be critical, but we must take this first critical step in passing Senate Bill 4 into law. Oregon CHIPS is a historic investment in our semiconductor industry. These funds will support siting of new employers as well as in investments in our research institutions, community colleges, and workforce partners. We're also addressing adequate land availability while protecting our natural resources and productive farmland. Passing Oregon CHIPS will be a huge win for our state and our national security. At the 2023 World Economic Forum, Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger told a global audience that, quote, where technology supply chains are and where semiconductors are built is more important than oil reserves for the next 5 decades, unquote. With these investments in our semiconductor industry, Oregon will play a major role in keeping our country and our democratic partners around the globe safe. I will be voting yes for this critical bill, and I hope you will join me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize Senator Linthicum.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I can start, I would suggest a no vote is more appropriate, and let me recap the reasons why. First of all, the per capita number that we heard from one of the co-carriers is, quite frankly, irrelevant. What really matters is volume. Volume is key, and along with volume is the technology and fabrication density that they are capable of producing. And the fab plants that are in Malaysia, Indonesia, in Taiwan, first and foremost, are far superior to any technology that we have running here. Second, the Oregon budget projection is not yet finalized. We've heard warning after warning from both sides of the aisle with regard to, gee, we don't know if we're going to be able to fund this enterprise that we all have faithfully adhered to. The faith is the hard part in that. What is it exactly we have faith in? The discussion up till now has been 500 contiguous acres, maybe 600 of prime farmland that produces our food today. Maybe we could do it in those areas where there's a metro area, population center, et cetera, et cetera. And yet we heard from the co-carrier, the other co-carrier, that fab facilities are typically 1,200 acres, twice as many acres as we're currently sifting through in our discussions. So we're way out of step, and we really have shot ourselves in the foot by allowing government to step into the middle of private enterprise. You may recall Solyndra. Solyndra, right in the heart of the Obama administration, was a company that was supposed to be top of the line. The company claimed they could cover more roof area with more productive solar capacity at better cost. The panels were claimed to be unlike any other product on the market. $535 million was invested in Solyndra, and within 2 years they were bankrupt. All of the chief executives, the financial officers, the president, co-chair, vice chair, however you want to call those people, they all filled their suitcases with money and skipped out of town. The default on the bonds harmed somewhere near $1.2 billion worth of investors. And there was a lawsuit. The lawsuit was to recover the money. And by the way, Solyndra at one time said they would have a market cap of from $1.76 billion to $2 billion within 2 years. But within 2 years, they were actually bankrupt. And Solyndra had the $535 million loan from the Obama administration. They settled a claim with Yingli Green Energy Holding Company for $7.5 million. And then in April 2016, just 7 years ago, they settled another claim for $45 million out of the 535. Someone has to ask, where in the world did that money go? How much land did that money buy? How many factory floors did that money build? that are now all empty. And then the last point that is quite relevant, since I used to work at Hughes Aircraft in the semiconductor and electronic manufacturing facility in Newport Beach, you have to wonder, with Southern California was once the foremost producer of microelectronic circuits and semiconductors in the entire US, where did those enterprises go? They went to Taiwan, they went to Malaysia, they went to Indonesia, because the labor costs in those countries was far less on a comparative basis than anything you could do here. Land was cheaper, costs were lower, production values were improved by going offshore. And here in Oregon, with BOLI regulating how you employ your people, how many chips they can eat on their lunch break, what they do on their weekends, and how many weeks off they get for maternity care, these are issues that haven't even been thought of when it comes to who's willing to come to Oregon and invest money. This is a bad idea, and I suggest a no vote.
Senator Robinson yielded his time. Recognize Senator Steiner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I really hadn't planned to speak today, but there have been a lot of comments about the budget, so I thought I'd better. There's an adage that you have to spend money to make money. That's one of the things we're doing with this bill. The state of Oregon is spending money like any other business. It is investing money in future technology, just like any smart business, in order to make money. You heard the carrier from District 15 tell us about the impact of just one of these fab plants in terms of revenue to the state over a relatively short time frame. That's a heck of an ROI on $200 million. I wish all of my investments got that good an ROI. I bet you do too. Will all of them be perfect? Will every single project succeed? Probably not. But we have really, really good people in our Department of Consumer and Business Services, in our Business Development Department, in all parts of state government to keep a close eye on these proposals, and they will be further vetted by the federal government. Now, are those perfect? No, I'm not going to claim they are. But every business involves taking risks. Are we taking a risk? Sure. Is it a smart risk? Yes, it is. It is a well thought out risk? Yes, it is. Do we have the capacity to do this financially as a state? Almost, regardless of what the May forecast says? Yes, we do. And if we fail to make the investment now, as others have said, we will look back on this time and be devastated by the lost opportunity that we will have to consider. I urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Linthicum for a second time.
Relevant. Thank you, Mr. President. I thought it was relevant to address this risk concept because in Lakeview, in Lake County, there was a $325 million, so half of what we've got here essentially, measure to liquefy juniper trees to create jet fuel for the Navy, for UPS, and for Southwest Airlines. What a beautiful idea. This is blue sky all the way. And you have to wonder, now that we've got these ideas and these risks and this investment in possible jobs in Lakeview from just 2 years ago, what does that Lakeview facility produce today? That Lakeview facility is bankrupt. That Lakeview facility was never even completed. That Lakeview facility is an eyesore on the landscape. They're trying to auction off the bits and pieces and parts and machinery and stainless steel bolts and tubing that exists all over the landscape. Nary a drop of fuel came out of any of those pipes. Nary a juniper tree went onto the input pallet and nothing was created out of that $325 million. Those bondholders have been sacrificed to the god of investing in wasted time, energy, and products run by the government. It's about time we let private enterprise figure out how they can make a profit and generate the innovation and creativity that allows them to come to the table in a meaningful way. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no further discussion, Senator Solomon, do you wish to close?
Yes, thank you. Colleagues, we have an opportunity today to solidify a strong economy for Oregon for decades to come, one that will support the needs of communities around our state with good-paying jobs in a critical industry for our future. Senate Bill 4 will help existing businesses expand and bring new businesses to Oregon looking for the opportunities our state can provide. But most importantly, our vote today will set us on a path forward for a future where our kids and our grandkids can live and thrive in this state. As a mom, a grandma, former school board member, and as a senator from the heart of the Silicon Forest, supporting a sustainable economy for our future and answering this national call to action is very important to me. Not only will this legislation build an ecosystem for success in the present, but it has the potential to make Oregon a prime destination for innovation and growth in the future. Colleagues, just yesterday, Intel announced an expansion here in Oregon, in Hillsboro, on their existing property. I want to address the concerns that were raised here today. As a strong champion for the environment, I care about preserving our land. There are strong provisions in this bill that will ensure that there are limited sites outside of the UGB that can be created, and only if we receive interest for a specific site area. The Semiconductor Task Force found there are plenty of sites within the UGB that can be used for semiconductor manufacturing throughout our state. However, large fabs, like the one that we lost to Ohio, require more than 800 acres of contiguous land. That space does not exist in the Portland metro area. That is a key cluster for semiconductor development, an area close to the Portland International Airport, close to our talented workforce. Senate Bill 4 addresses that with limited temporary flexibility. The governor can only designate up to 2 of those larger sites after a transparent and accountable process. Oregonians are already training for jobs in the semiconductor industry, and we want them to work here. Graduates out of our state higher education programs have 2.5 job offers waiting for them. We have 13 STEM hubs across Oregon that are building our future and finding innovative ways to educate young kids, especially underrepresented kids, in science, technology, engineering, math, and the arts. This legislation will create jobs for Oregonians like Connell Fossoy, a Century High School student interested in a career in engineering. He is enrolled in the Boley Hillsboro School District Advanced Manufacturing Apprenticeship Program. While he earns, while he learns, he's gaining work experience, hands-on problem-solving skills, and a paycheck so that he can save for college. With Oregon Chips, we'll build the industry we need to keep the genius of the 400 to 500 students who are signing up for the mechatronics classes at Forest Grove High School every year in this state. We'll support young people like Maria Gutierrez, who took advantage of these classes, graduated from Forest Grove High School, and now works as a Tech Level 3 at Gyra Semiconductors in Hillsboro. She has secured a strong wage, benefits, and a place for growth in her career. Forest Grove High School is a prime example of the benefits these industry partnerships bring to our students and their futures. As we heard from Mayor Travis Stovall of Gresham a member of the Semiconductor Task Force, these investments will create good-paying jobs that will lift families from poverty to prosperity. Senate Bill 4 is here to help connect, collaborate, and build our ecosystem for a prosperous Oregon. The bill before you today is a critical first step. Yes, we have more work to do, but we have to get started so that we don't get left behind. Companies are waiting for the governor to sign this. There have already been 8 statements of interest filed with the governor's office. 8 companies that are not seeking land outside the UGB. Other states are passing legislation. The notice of funding opportunity is already open and accepting applications. When Oregon lands just one semiconductor fab, it will support more than 26,000 permanent jobs and generate $2.8 billion in state net revenue for over 20 years, while bringing in an 8-to-1 on return on investment from this industry. This bipartisan, bicameral legislation will empower Oregon to retain our place as a global leader of innovation and make us a key part of securing the semiconductor supply chain. But most importantly, this bill will keep our kids close to home. We'll create the jobs and the opportunities that they need to grow for their future and their own families in our communities, both urban and rural. From poverty to prosperity, all families in Oregon. So colleagues, I urge your support of Senate Bill 4. Thank you.
The question now rises upon the third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 4B. Those who are of the opinion that the bill should be passed will answer aye as their names are called. Those opposed, no. The clerk will please call the roll.
Woods. Anderson. Bonham. Boquist. Campos. Dembro. Finley. Frederick. Gelser-Bluen. Gerard. Golden. Gorsuch. Hansel. Hayden. Jama. Knope. Lieber. Linthicum. Manning. Meek. Patterson. Przonski. Robinson. Brock Smith. Solman. Steiner. Taylor. Thatcher. Weber. President Wagner.
Aye.
Excused: Gorsuch. Voting nay: Bonham, Boquist, Gerard, Hayden, Linthicum, Robinson, Brock Smith, Thatcher, Weber. 20 ayes.
Senate Bill 4B, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Senator Boquist in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vote explanation.
Vote explanation.
Colleagues, I voted against the bill, but I didn't speak against it because I didn't want to destroy anybody's dreams. And every single person I heard speak on it, one way or the other, has the same dream of creating jobs in a better Oregonian. I specifically voted against it for actually the exact opposite of my peer on the Revenue Committee is that having been in the national defense sector for decades, and having been for 8 years the chair or vice chair or on the Veterans and Emergency Committee, trying to fight with the federal government who has moved every single military base out of Alaska, Washington, and Oregon, and every piece of defense industry and structure to be encouraged to move out because we're within nuclear strike range of missiles and bombers from China and Russia who believe they can win a first strike war. And so even the good United States senator who fought for this thing has fought time and again, and we have National Guard aircraft with 2 pilots sitting on the runway for the entire defense of the West Coast because the Department of Defense and the Pentagon and Washington, D.C. are willing to write off Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. Write us off after the first strike. And so as we see the defense industry leaving, what we do have success in is R&D here and small R&D sites. I personally don't see anybody, and just today the Defense Production Act regarding this bill was implemented by the President of the United States, and it ain't sending stuff here. 42 miles that way to the coast, the Chinese have a nano-nuclear capacity strike against this state. I hope you're all right. I hope we can build the plant, and I hope we have all these wages that are out there. But I just want to point out to you the national security reality in Washington, D.C. is significantly different than what is pictured here on the floor. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. It doesn't mean we don't need R&D. I just want to point out to you that the situation is vaguely or vastly different in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Senator Brock Smith in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to change my vote on Senate Bill 4.
Senator Brock Smith requests consent to be recorded as an aye or nay, Senator?
Aye.
Aye on Senate Bill 4. It will not change the outcome. If there is no objection,